Something changed orbit tonight. Not a meteor, not debris, not a calibration error in the passive array. Something moved, deliberately, incrementally, against every law of orbital mechanics I was trained to understand, and positioned itself between the Manticore and Earth. I've been watching it for 40 minutes. It has not moved again. It is just sitting there, at an angle that should not be possible without active propulsion, in a polar orbit that, as of 3 hours ago, did not exist on any chart in this archive, and it is transmitting, low frequency, rhythmic, a pulse that repeats every 11 seconds with the precision of something that has been doing this for a very long time and has no reason to stop. I found the file in the archive 20 minutes ago, one that was sitting in a subfolder, passed over a dozen times without opening, labeled with a designation I did not recognize, 2 words and a date, Black Night, 1954. My name is Captain Arthur Vance. I am alone on the deep space vessel Manticore, and whatever is transmitting from that polar orbit right now started the moment I opened that file. I do not think that is a coincidence. I am going to tell you everything I know. Don't look at the sky tonight. The public record on the Black Night goes back to 1954, not 1157, not Sputnik, not the early years of the space race, when the first human-made satellites were going up and everyone was watching the sky. 1954, 3 years before humanity officially had anything in orbit. The United States Air Force logged an observation of an unknown object in a polar orbit, approximately 600 miles above the surface. The object was estimated to weigh approximately 15 tons. For context, Sputnik weighed 184 pounds. Whatever was up there in 1954 was not Sputnik. It was not a Soviet weather balloon, or a classified American experiment, or a piece of debris from a launch that had not happened yet. It was something nobody had put there. The Air Force logged it, filed it, and the file disappeared into exactly the kind of administrative silence that the archive on this vessel is full of. The silence that means someone decided this particular piece of information needed to be managed carefully. I know that silence. I have been reading it for months. Nikola Tesla heard it first. This is the part of the Black Knight story that most people skip over, because it sounds too convenient, too perfectly assembled to be real. But the documentation exists. In 1899, Tesla was running experiments at his laboratory in Colorado Springs. He was working on wireless transmission, the early foundations of what would eventually become radio communication, and he had equipment sensitive enough to detect signals that no commercial technology of the era could pick up. He picked something up. He described it in his notes as a series of regular, repeating signals, structured, consistent, coming from a direction that he initially attributed to Mars or Venus, because in 1899 those were the only plausible sources of structured signal transmission that did not originate on Earth. He later revised that attribution. He stopped speculating about where it came from. His notes on the subject become significantly more careful after a certain point, more redacted in feel, if not in fact. The kind of careful that happens when a person has decided that what they are writing down might someday be read by people they did not intend to share it with. His prosperity, Tesla's 1899 observations, ends with a single notation I have read 4 times. Signal characteristics consistent with Black Knight transmission profile. Interval 11 seconds. 11 seconds, the same interval as what I am hearing right now on the secondary array. Here is what I keep coming back to about Tesla. He was the most technically capable receiver of his era. His Colorado Springs equipment was built to detect signals at the edge of what was physically possible in 1899. He was not someone prone to misidentifying static. He logged what he heard. He tried to respond to it. He spent months attempting to establish two-way communication with what he eventually stopped calling signals from Mars in his public statements, while his private notes tell a different story. And then he went quiet on the subject. I investigated and found a mundane explanation. Just quiet. I know that specific quiet. I have been watching it in this archive for months. It is the quiet of someone who found something and then found out that finding it had consequences. Tesla died in 1943. His papers were confiscated by the Office of Alien Property. Within hours of his death, the FBI maintained a file on him. Most of his late-period research has never been fully released. The archive has fragments, enough to see the shape of what he was working on in his final years. He was not building a death ray. He was trying to build a receiver capable of isolating a single repeating signal from the background noise of the cosmos. 11 seconds. He never finished it. I want to be careful here because I have made a commitment to myself on this vessel to document accurately, not dramatically. So let me say this precisely. I do not know if what I am hearing is the same signal Tesla detected in 1899. I do not know if it is the same object the Air Force logged in 1954. I do not know if the object I am watching on the passive array is the Black Knight satellite, as described in the archive, or something else entirely that happens to share certain characteristics. What I know is this: the archive contains documentation of a repeating signal on an 11-second interval associated with an unidentified orbital object. That object has been in the historical record since at least 1954. There is currently an unidentified object in a polar orbit that my instruments cannot identify, cannot account for, and cannot explain. It is transmitting on an 11-second interval, and the transmission began the moment I opened the Black Knight file. I have spent the last 40 minutes trying to find an alternative explanation for that coincidence. I have not found one. The declassified material in this archive covers several additional contacts with the Black Knight over the following decades. 1960 U.S. Navy tracking stations logged an unknown object in polar orbit. The Department of Defense issued a statement attributing it to a Soviet satellite. The statement was retracted 6 weeks later without explanation. 1963, astronaut Gordon Cooper on Mercury Faith 7 reported a glowing green object in front of his capsule. His transmissions at ground control was recorded, but not broadcast in the live feed. The tracking station in Manticore, Australia, confirmed the object on radar. NASA's official response was to attribute Cooper's report to electrical interference from his equipment, despite the corroborating radar data, which the archive notes was never publicly released. 1973, Scottish author Duncan Lunnan claimed to have decoded a series of radio echoes first observed in the 1920s as a star map. The map, he argued, showed the location of a star system called Epsilon Botis, as it would have appeared approximately 13 years ago. Lunnan later retracted the claim. The archive's notation on Lunnan's retraction reads, "Source retraction achieved. Map data reclassified. Source retraction achieved. Not Lunnan changed his mind. Not subsequent analysis disproved the theory. Source retraction achieved." That is the language of a managed outcome. I've seen enough of those in this archive to know what one looks like. Here is the thing about the Black Knight that does not get discussed enough. It is not just that the object exists, or that it has been observed repeatedly over decades, or that the official explanations for those observations keep changing or disappearing. It is what the object appears to be doing. Because an object in polar orbit that has been there for 13,000 years, if Lunan's star map analysis is even partially correct, if the signal that Tesla detected in 1899 is genuinely connected to what the Air Force tracked in 1954, is not a piece of space junk. It is not a dead satellite. Something that transmits on a consistent interval for 126 years minimum, that adjusts its orbit when necessary, that appears in the historical record of multiple unconnected observers across multiple centuries. That is something that is still running, still operational, still doing whatever it was put there to do. And the question I have been sitting with for the past hour, alone in this array bay, with the 11-second pulse in my headset, is, what was it put there to do? The archive has a section on this. I have been reading it carefully. The theories break into two categories, and I want to describe both of them accurately, because they point in very different directions. The first category, it is ours. Not human-built in the conventional sense, not the product of any recorded civilization, but the product of a previous version of human civilization, one that existed approximately 13,000 years ago, developed to a level of technological sophistication we have not yet matched in our current iteration, and placed the Black Knight in orbit as a record, a backup, a message to whoever came after. The archive cites this theory in connection with the Younger Dryas impact event, the hypothesis currently debated in mainstream geology, that a catastrophic impact or series of impacts approximately 12,900 years ago caused a rapid global cooling that ended the last ice age and potentially destroyed or severely damaged a civilization that was already much further along than the archaeological record typically suggests. If that civilization knew what was coming, or even suspected it, they might have done exactly what any advanced civilization facing extinction would do. They put something in orbit, outside the atmosphere, beyond the reach of whatever was about to happen on the surface, running on whatever power source they would have developed that we cannot yet replicate, still transmitting 13,000 years later, in case anyone was left to listen. The second category is harder to sit with. It is not ours. It was never ours. It was placed in orbit around this planet by something else, for reasons that have nothing to do with preserving human knowledge, or leaving a message for survivors. The archive's language in this section gets careful in a specific way, I recognize. The way it gets careful when it is describing something that the people who compiled it did not have a comfortable framework for. The word it uses, in a notation I found buried 3 layers deep in the Black Knight subsection, is observation. The Black Knight has been in observation of this planet for approximately 13,000 years, not transmitting to us, not leaving us a message, watching, recording, sending its observations somewhere else. Let me think about what 13,000 years of continuous observation actually means. At 13,000 years, the Black Knight, if the timeline is accurate, was watching before the pyramids, before Stonehenge, before Sumeria, before every civilization that we consider ancient, was anything more than scattered groups of humans trying to survive whatever came after the Younger Dryas impact. It watched the whole thing. It watched us build fire and agriculture and writing and mathematics and cities and empires and the entire arc of recorded human history from a vantage point 600 miles above the surface. It watched Babylon. It watched Rome. It watched the plague years. It watched industrialization. It watched the first atomic test, which the archive notes called a detectable change in the Black Knight's transmission frequency for approximately 6 hours before it returned to baseline 6 hours. Something in the transmission responded to a nuclear detonation and then settled back into its rhythm. That is not passive observation. That is something with a threshold, something with criteria. Something that notes specific events because specific events are relevant to whatever it is measuring. What was it measuring at Trinity, New Mexico in 1945? The archive does not say explicitly, but I have been reading enough of this archive to make a reasonable inference. It was measuring the signal, the specific frequency that human consciousness generates under conditions of extreme collective fear, anticipation, and the specific quality of all that comes from watching something that has never existed before come into existence. July 16, 1945. The first nuclear weapon. Every person present generating the source frequency at a level that had never been produced before in the history of the species, the Black Knight noticed. It took 6 hours to process what it was recording. Then it went back to watching. About the fact that they woke up when I said the name of this vessel. About the fact that whatever they are, they have been present in the historical record of this planet for longer than recorded history. About the fact that the Black Knight began transmitting the moment I opened the file. And about the cathedral at bearing 274. Cycling on its 44-minute interval, the same interval it has been running for at least 54 years. Multiple objects, multiple signals, multiple systems running quietly in the background of human history, doing something, reporting to something, waiting for something. I do not think the Black Knight is alone up there. I think it is one node in a network. And I think the network just noticed that someone on the Manticore started asking questions. I want to tell you something about the specific quality of being watched. I do not mean surveillance in the paranoid sense. I mean the actual physical sensation of having attention directed at you from something you cannot see. There is a part of the nervous system that evolved specifically to detect this. The part that made our ancestors turn around in the dark before the predator announced itself. The part that registers the quality of air in a room differently when someone is standing behind you versus when you are alone. That system has been active in me since I opened the Black Knight file. Not the jittery anxiety of the early weeks on this vessel, when everything was unfamiliar. Something older than that, quieter. The sensation of being the subject of something's attention. The architects turned towards this bay. When I opened the file, the object in polar orbit started transmitting. When I opened the file, the temperature dropped when I started reading the Lunans section. I am either experiencing a series of unconnected coincidences, or I am not. I have been alone on this vessel long enough to have stopped hedging on that question. The Black Knight has been watching this planet for 13 years. It watched the entire history of my species from orbit. And when a vessel carrying crew selected specifically from bloodlines that Project Tree spent decades trying to monitor and contain, when that vessel departed Earth orbit and headed toward the cathedral at bearing 274, the Black Knight reoriented. Targeted acquisition. I was the target before I knew there was anything to aim at. I do not know yet or by means for what happens next, but I am going to keep recording until I find out. The architects are still facing this direction. The pulse in my headset is still 11 seconds, and I am still here. I checked the environmental sensors. No malfunction. No explanation in the system logs. The architects are in compartment 00. They have not moved. The passive array still shows them standing in their pods, facing the direction of this bay. They have been facing this direction since I opened the file. I want to document that precisely. They did not turn toward the array bay when the unknown object appeared in polar orbit. They did not react to the transmission signal. They turned when I opened a file labeled Black Knight, like they were waiting for me to find it. Like this was always the next thing I was supposed to find, and the sequence I have been following through this archive, the DNA report, the Parsons file, the Apollo transmission gap, all of it was building towards this specific document. I do not know what that means. I am not sure I have the framework yet to understand what it means. What I know is that there is an unidentified object in polar orbit that should not be there. It is transmitting on an interval that matches historical records going back at least 126 years. The architects oriented toward my position the moment I found the documentation. And I still have the 11-second pulse in my headset. I have been trying to decode the signal for the past 20 minutes. Not because I think I can crack something that professional analysts and government agencies have not managed to decode in 70 years, but because doing something is better than sitting still with an unexplained pulse in my ears and a temperature that keeps dropping. The signal is structured. I can hear that. It is not random noise, not static, not the kind of undifferentiated broadcast you would expect from a natural source. It repeats in a cycle. 11 seconds of transmission, then a gap of approximately 3 seconds, then the next cycle. Within each 11-second burst, there are variations, subtle ones, changes in frequency that repeat in a pattern I cannot quite resolve, but that are clearly intentional. The archive's technical appendix, the section I have been cross-referencing against my real-time readings, describes the signal as a multi-layered transmission consistent with data compression techniques that exceed current human engineering capabilities. The appendix was written in 1978. Whatever was being compressed into that signal in 1978, in ways that exceeded human engineering, has had another 48 years to receive no updates. Because no one has figured out what it is, or if they have, that information did not make it into this archive. I am going to tell you what I think the Black Knight is, not what I can prove. What I think, based on everything I have read tonight, and everything I have been finding on this vessel since I came aboard. I think it is an observer node, part of a distributed system that has been cataloging this planet, its population, its development, its electromagnetic output, its biological signatures, for a very long time. Not for human benefit, not as a gift to us, or a message to us, or a warning to us, for the benefit of whatever deployed it. The system it reports to is the same system that deployed the architects. The same system that constructed the cathedral at bearing 274. The same system that, if the archive's deepest files are accurate, has been present in the vicinity of this planet in various configurations for the full span of recorded human history and well before it. The Black Knight is not watching us because we are interesting. It is watching us because we are a resource. And the specific resource is not our labor or our territory, or even our biology in the straightforward sense. It is our signal. The same signal I have been reading about in document after document in this archive. The source frequency, the specific resonance that human consciousness generates. The one that the dying entity in the classified facility was talking about when it said we do not know our own potential. The Black Knight has been measuring that signal for 13 years, cataloging its growth, its variations, its peaks and troughs across populations and centuries, reporting back to something that wants to know when the harvest is ready. The 11-second pulse just changed. I am not misreading the instruments. The interval shifted, 11 seconds to 9, then 8, then back to 11. Not a malfunction, not drift, a deliberate change and return, like an acknowledgement, like it knows I have been listening. There is one more thing I need to document before I close this session. The archive's Black Knight file has an addendum, added at a different time than the main document. The metadata timestamp is more recent, though I cannot read the exact date through the classification layer. The addendum is short. It says, transmission spike, logged concurrent with Manticore departure from Earth orbit. Spike consistent with target acquisition. Black Knight appears to have reoriented. Target acquisition. The Black Knight reoriented when the Manticore left Earth. It was already watching this vessel before I boarded, before this mission began. Whatever I was selected for, whatever the project tree files and the bloodline data, and the sequence of documents I have been reading through were building toward, the Black Knight knew about it before anyone on Earth made the decision. Or it helped make the decision. I need to sit with that. The architects are very still. The temperature in the array bay is 4 degrees below baseline. And the pulse in my headset is back to 11 seconds. Steady, patient. A rhythm of something that has been doing this for longer than my species has had written language and will keep doing it long after this vessel is gone. Captain Arthur Vance. Deep space vessel Manticore. The Black Knight is watching. It has always been watching. I do not know who it reports to, but I think I am getting closer to finding out. Do not look at the sky tonight. End of transmission.